When I opened the bank statement and saw my account practically empty, I felt the world crumble beneath my feet. There, in the cold plastic chair at the bank, with trembling hands holding that paper that sealed my humiliation, I, Sarah Marie Johnson, 67 years old, discovered that I had been robbed by those I loved most. The value of my retirement, 40 years of hard work, of freezing dawns preparing meals for children, of painful knees and dried hands had disappeared. And the worst part, the transactions were legal, made with my own authorization, but I had never authorized anything. My friend Zelda, who was with me in that devastating moment, held my hand when she saw me falter. "Sarah, breathe, honey," she whispered. But her voice seemed to come from far away. I couldn't stop looking at those numbers, at those dates, at that cruel reality that hit me like a punch to the stomach. $40,000. $40,000 that represented my simplest dreams, a garden renovation, a trip to see my siblings in Alabama, a new sofa to receive my grandchildren with dignity. The manager, a young man with glasses and a tie, looked at me with a mixture of pity and discomfort. "Mrs. Johnson, all the transactions were made with your card and PIN. There's even your signature here," he explained, showing me documents I had never seen. My signature. My handwriting. But I didn't remember signing that. How was it possible? That's when the memory hit me like lightning. 3 months earlier, when I finally got my retirement after struggling so much with paperwork, I had handed over all the documents to my son Andrew. "Mom, let me take care of everything. You've suffered enough," he had said, with that smile that always reassured me. And beside him, Tiffany, my daughter-in-law, nodded in agreement. "That's right, Mom Sarah. You rest while we take care of everything." Now I understood. The blank signatures they asked me to give just in case, the documents that needed to be organized, the inexplicable delay for the first payment to hit the account. Everything made sense, a bitter and painful sense that made me question everything I believed about family, about love, about trust. I left the bank in silence, carrying not only the certainty of betrayal, but the weight of a lifetime of sacrifices that seemed to have been thrown in the trash. The streets of Golden Valley, our small town where everyone knows each other, seemed to look at me with pity. Did everyone already know? Was I the last to discover my own humiliation? To understand how we got here, I need to go back in time, when everything began so differently from what it became. I was a simple woman, born and raised in rural Alabama, daughter of farmers who could barely write their own names. I married young to Anthony, a hard-working man who gave me 3 children, John, the eldest, who went to New York looking for better opportunities, Mary, my only daughter who moved to the countryside after marriage, and Andrew, the youngest, the apple of my eye, who was always more sensitive, more affectionate, closer to me. When Anthony died 15 years ago from a sudden heart attack at 52, I found myself alone with 3 children to raise and insufficient income. That's when I got the job, as a lunch lady at the municipal school. I remember the first day as if it were yesterday, me trembling with nervousness, afraid I wouldn't be able to handle it, but determined not to let my children go without. For 40 years, I woke up at 5 in the morning, 6 days a week. I prepared porridge, soup, bread with butter, fruit juice for hundreds of children. My hands became marked by years of work, permanent calluses, always broken nails, skin dried by steam from enormous pots. But I did everything with love, because I knew that for many of those children, the school lunch was the only decent meal of the day. I saw generations pass through that school kitchen. Children I fed, grew up, graduated, had children, and brought those children for me to feed too. I was always respected in the community. Mrs. Sarah, from the cafeteria, they called me affectionately. I was someone who made a difference in people's lives, even if in a simple way. During all these years, I raised my children practically alone. John became an electronics technician and got a good job in New York. Mary became a teacher and built a solid family in the countryside. And Andrew, my Andrew, was always different. More of a dreamer, less focused on studies, but with a heart that I believed was pure. When Andrew met Tiffany 5 years ago, I was genuinely happy. She was a beautiful young woman, 28 years old, with always styled hair, impeccable nails, clothes that seemed too expensive for our simple standard of living. She worked as a receptionist at a private clinic and had an educated way of speaking that impressed me. "Mom Sarah," she called me from the first day. You're an inspiration to me. Raising 3 children alone, working for so long, what strength. Her words were sweet as honey, and I, needy for the recognition I rarely received, let myself be enveloped by that apparent admiration. Tiffany always offered to help me. She went with me to the doctor when Andrew was working, helped me with shopping at the market, praised my home cooking. You cook better than my mother, she would say, laughing. And I, foolish me, felt special, loved, important in someone's life besides my grandchildren. When they got married, 3 years ago, I dreamed of grandchildren running through the house, of Sunday lunches full of laughter, of the united family I always wanted to have. Tiffany said she wanted to take care of me, as if I were her own mother, and I believed those words faithfully. The first time I suspected something was wrong was too subtle for me to notice at the time. Tiffany began making comments about my house, always disguised as concern. Mom Sarah, this faucet has been dripping for months. It's a waste of water and could cause problems. Or this sofa is already asking for retirement, isn't it? You deserve something more comfortable. At first I thought they were caring suggestions, but later I realized she always made these observations in front of other people, as if she wanted to plant in others' minds that I was being negligent with myself, as if I needed someone to take care of me. Slowly, Tiffany began inserting herself into aspects of my life that were previously mine alone. When I went to the bank, she offered to accompany me. Let me handle it. I understand these modern things better, she would say. When important correspondence arrived, she volunteered to explain the content. These technical terms are complicated, Mom Sarah. Lucky you have us to help. And I, gradually gave up my autonomy, without realizing it. Not out of incapacity. I had always taken care of my own things, but because I believed I was being loved and protected. What's the difference between affection and manipulation, when the gestures are the same? Andrew, my son, changed too. Before he would seek me out to talk about everything. He told me about his problems at work, his worries, his dreams, but after marriage, our conversations became superficial. He always seemed in a hurry, always worried, and when I tried to get close, Tiffany would appear with some urgent demand that required his attention. Andrew, come here quickly. I need your help with something, she would say, whenever I started talking to my son. And he, obedient like a little dog, would run to attend to his wife. I would stay there, with words half spoken, feeling like an intruder in my own son's life. But what really should have alerted me was the change in their lifestyle. Andrew worked as a salesman in a furniture store, an honest job, but not particularly well paid. Tiffany earned little at the clinic. However, suddenly, they began appearing at home with new clothes, expensive shoes, the latest model phone for each of them. We bought it on credit, Mom. Nowadays everyone does it like this. Andrew explained, when I asked how they could afford to buy so many things. And Tiffany added, it's an investment in ourselves, Mom Sarah. You always said we have to value ourselves, didn't you? I had said that, but that's not what I meant. I was talking about dignity, about self-respect, about not letting anyone humiliate you, not about rampant consumerism financed by debt. The turning point began when I finally got my retirement. After months of going back and forth to the relevant agencies, of lost and found documents, of endless waits in lines, it finally came through. $40,000 in back payments, plus the monthly benefit. When I heard the news, I cried with happiness, not because of the money itself, but because of what it represented: recognition for my years of work, the possibility of fulfilling small dreams I had kept for so long, the security of not needing to depend on anyone in old age. My plans were simple and modest. I wanted to renovate my small garden, which had been abandoned for years. I dreamed of planting roses, jasmine, making a small herb garden. I wanted to replace my old sofa, which creaked every time the grandchildren sat down to watch television with me. And most of all, I wanted to take a trip to Alabama, to see my siblings whom I hadn't seen for more than 10 years. When I told my plans to Andrew and Tiffany, their reaction surprised me. Instead of the joy I expected, I noticed a strange tension in the air. Tiffany forced a smile and said, "How wonderful, Mom Sarah. You deserve it so much." But her eyes didn't smile along with her mouth. Andrew seemed uncomfortable. "Mom, are you sure you want to spend that money like that? Maybe it would be better to save part of it, right? For emergencies. I found it strange that my son was discouraging me from fulfilling such simple dreams, but I thought he was being prudent. It was Tiffany who suggested they help me with the paperwork. These bank things are very complicated, Mom Sarah. Let Andrew take care of everything. He understands this better. And I, fool that I was, thought I was being cared for, protected, loved. I handed over all the documents to Andrew. I signed the papers they brought me, trusting blindly that my son would never harm me. They're just formalities, Mom, he said every time I asked what I was signing. Bank documents, routine authorizations. Weeks passed without the money appearing in my account. Every time I asked, Andrew gave me a different excuse. The bank said it takes a while for the first payment, or you have to wait for clearance, or everything's fine, Mom. It's just a matter of time. During this period, I began to notice subtle but significant changes in Tiffany's behavior. She visited less, and when she came, she seemed distant, hurried. The conversations that once lasted hours became 15-minute visits, always with some excuse to leave quickly. At the same time, I began to see strange activity on social media. Tiffany's mother, Mrs. Louise, whom I only knew by sight, began posting photos of a house under renovation, walls being painted, new furniture being delivered, a kitchen being remodeled. New phase, thank God, said the caption of one of the photos. Initially, I didn't associate one thing with the other. Why would I? It was just a coincidence that my daughter-in-law's mother was renovating her house at the same time my money was delayed, or at least that's what I wanted to believe. But the last straw came from where I least expected it. I was at the market, doing my weekly shopping, when I met Mrs. Sebastian, a known neighbor. We were talking about trivialities when she let slip, without any malice, "Sarah, how good that you managed to help Tiffany's mother-in-law with the house renovation, right? I heard you gave her a good amount. What a generous heart you have." I felt my blood freeze in my veins. "What do you mean, Sebastian?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, Tiffany herself mentioned at the bakery that you had helped her mother with money to renovate the house, that the house was in terrible condition, and you, with a good heart, decided to help. She said you mentioned that you already have a place to live, so you preferred to help someone who was in need." Each word from Mrs. Sebastian was like a stab to the chest. I had never said anything like that. I had never authorized any help for Tiffany's mother. In fact, I barely knew the woman. We had only spoken in polite greetings during the wedding. I arrived home trembling, with my heart racing. I immediately called Andrew, but he didn't answer. I sent a message, and the reply came hours later. "Mom, I'm working, we'll talk later." I called Tiffany, and she didn't answer either. That's when Zelda, my decades-long friend, suggested we go to the bank to check my situation. "Sarah, something is very wrong. Let's clear this up once and for all," she said, with the determination of someone who had witnessed too many injustices in life to stay quiet. And that's how we arrived at that devastating moment at the bank, looking at my empty account and the receipts for transactions I had never consciously authorized. If this story is touching your heart as it touched mine while living it, please like and subscribe to the channel to continue following real stories of overcoming like this one. Unfortunately, stories like mine are more common than they should be, but I believe that by sharing our experiences we can strengthen each other. After the discovery at the bank, I spent 3 days in shock. I couldn't eat, sleep, or even talk properly to my grandchildren when they came to visit me. The betrayal was so deep that I felt physically sick. It wasn't just the money, it was the complete breakdown of trust, the realization that I had been manipulated by people I loved more than my own life. On the 4th day, I decided to face the situation. I called Andrew and said we needed to talk urgently. He tried to postpone it, but my voice must have conveyed the seriousness of the moment, because he agreed to come to my house that same afternoon. When Andrew arrived, he came alone. Tiffany, he said, was taking care of her mother, who had become ill after moving to the renovated house. Ironic, I thought. Taking care of her mother with my money. "Andrew," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "I know everything. I went to the bank, saw the statements, know that you used my money to renovate Tiffany's mother's house." My son turned pale. For a moment, I thought he was going to faint. His hands trembled when he tried to grab the glass of water I had served. "Mom, I can explain," he began, but his voice came out weak, without conviction. "Then explain," I said, sitting across from him at the kitchen table where we had talked so many times during his childhood and adolescence. And then Andrew told me everything. How Tiffany had discovered that her mother was living in precarious conditions, with leaks in the house, without adequate plumbing, with electrical problems. How she had become desperate and begun pressuring Andrew to find a solution. She said it was temporary, Mom, that we were going to replace the money as soon as we got a loan. She said you would understand, that family helps family, that you always taught us that. And why didn't you ask me directly? I questioned. Why the lies, the manipulation? Andrew lowered his eyes, ashamed. Tiffany said you would worry, that you would want to know all the details, that you would complicate things. She said it was better to solve it, and then tell you. She said, I repeated. And you, Andrew, what did you think? What did you feel? His. Didn't it occur to you that you were stealing from your own mother? It was the first time I used the word stealing, and the impact was visible. Andrew began to cry, thick, desperate tears, from someone who finally saw the dimension of what he had done. Mom, forgive me, he sobbed. I didn't think it was stealing. I thought it was just temporary help, that we would replace everything, that you wouldn't even find out, that I wouldn't even find out, I repeated slowly. In other words, you planned to lie to me forever. His. Andrew couldn't answer, and I, looking at my devastated son in front of me, felt a complex mixture of feelings: anger, disappointment, sadness, but also a touch of pity. I realized that Andrew wasn't the main villain of this story. He was a victim of Tiffany's manipulation as much as I was. Where is your wife? I asked. At her mother's house. The two of them are living together now in the renovated house. And how is the situation between you two? Andrew sighed deeply. It's not good, Mom. Since the money ran out, Tiffany has changed with me too. She's always irritated, always demanding that I get more money from somewhere. She says her mother can't go back to living the way she lived before. That's when I began to understand the complete plan. Tiffany hadn't used my money just to renovate her mother's house. She had created a situation where it would be impossible to go back. Her mother was now accustomed to a higher standard of living, and someone would have to sustain that. And that someone would be my son, or rather, it would be me, through my son. Andrew, I said, carefully choosing my words, you need to make a decision. Either you're on the side of your family of origin, where you learned values like honesty and respect, or you're on the side of people who use manipulation and lies to get what they want. My son looked at me with eyes red from crying so much. Mom, I don't know what to do anymore. I love Tiffany, but now I see that she's not who I thought she was. At that moment, I felt an unexpected compassion for my son. He had been manipulated as much as I had, maybe even more. Tiffany had used the love Andrew felt for her to make him betray his own principles, betray his own mother. What are you going to do now? I asked. I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to demand that she find a way to return the money to you, even if we have to sell something, take out a loan, work nights and weekends. I shook my head. Andrew, $40,000 isn't something you get by selling some clothes or working overtime, and even if you could, the problem isn't just the money. What is it then, Mom? The problem is trust. It's respect. It's consideration. You treated me as if I were a person without my own will, without the right to decide about my own life. You infantilized me, manipulated me, humiliated me. Andrew remained silent for a long time. Finally he said, Mom, how can you forgive me? Do you really want to be forgiven, or do you just want to feel less guilty? I asked. The question caught him off guard. He became thoughtful, and I realized it was the first time my son really reflected on the difference between repentance and guilt relief. I want to be forgiven, he said finally, but I also want to deserve that forgiveness. 2 weeks after that conversation, I received a call from Andrew at 6 in the morning. His voice was altered, almost hysterical. Mom, a tragedy happened. There was a fire at Tiffany's mother's house. My first impulse was concern. Was anyone hurt? No, thank God. But the house, The house was badly damaged. The preliminary report points to problems with the electrical installation. I felt a chill down my spine. Problems with the electrical installation. Yes, it seems whoever did the renovation wasn't qualified. They made improvised electrical work to save money, and that's what happened. Fate, it seems, has a peculiar sense of justice. In the following days, we discovered that the renovation had been done hastily, with cheap materials and unqualified labor. The house that looked beautiful in social media photos was, in reality, a walking danger. Irregular electrical installations, poorly done plumbing, compromised structure. Tiffany's mother, Mrs. Louise, had to move out urgently to her daughter's house. And that's when Andrew and Tiffany's situation began to get really complicated. Mrs. Louise was a lady with a strong personality, used to being in charge at home. She arrived at the couple's house, with 2 suitcases, and the expectation of being treated like the queen of the house. After all, she argued, Andrew and Tiffany had offered to take care of her when they did the renovation. Tiffany, who had always been vain, and liked to keep the house impeccable, suddenly found herself sharing space with a demanding mother-in-law, who rearranged furniture, criticized the food, turned the television up to maximum volume, and received visitors without warning. Andrew, pressured between his increasingly irritated wife and his increasingly demanding mother-in-law, began to understand in practice what it meant to reap what you sow. It was during this tumultuous period that I received an unexpected visit. Tiffany appeared at my door on a Tuesday afternoon, with red eyes and a disheveled appearance, something unprecedented for someone always so vain. "Mom, Sarah," she said, and for the first time her voice sounded genuinely broken, "can I talk to you?" I received her with courtesy, but without warmth. I offered coffee, which she refused, and we sat in the living room, with a heavy silence between us. "I know you know everything," she began. "Andrew told me you talked." I waited for her to continue. I wanted to explain. She tried, but I interrupted her. "Explain what, Tiffany? That you manipulated my son to steal my retirement money, that you made me sign documents without explaining what I was signing, that you spread around town that I had helped your mother when in reality you deceived me." Tiffany began to cry. They weren't delicate tears like the ones I had seen from her other times. They were desperate tears, from someone who finally saw the size of the hole she had dug. "Mom, Sarah, I was desperate. My mother lived in a horrible place, with leaks, without minimum conditions. I couldn't sleep knowing she was suffering, and you thought the solution was to make me suffer in her place. It wasn't that. I thought you wouldn't miss the money. You have your own house, guaranteed retirement, children who can help if needed." "Tiffany," I said, trying to stay calm, "you decided for me what I needed or didn't need. You infantilized me, disrespected me, humiliated me, and worse, you used my own son against me." She cried harder and harder. "I know I was wrong. I know I was horrible, but you need to understand. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but you did hurt. You hurt a lot." We remained silent for a few minutes, then Tiffany asked, "What can I do to fix this?" The question surprised me. I didn't expect her to take responsibility for fixing the situation. "Do you really want to know?" I asked. She nodded affirmatively. "First, publicly admit what you did. Stop the lie that I helped your mother. Tell the truth to whoever wants to hear it. Second, find a way, I don't know how, but find it, to return at least part of the money. Third, apologize for real, not because you want to feel better, but because you recognize the harm you did." Tiffany looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of shame, fear, and something that seemed to be finally honesty. "And fourth," I continued, "leave my son alone. Stop using him as a shield for your manipulations. Stop making him choose between you and his own conscience." In the months that followed, I witnessed a complete transformation in the family nucleus I thought I knew. Tiffany, pressured by the unsustainable situation at home, with her mother living with them, began to show her true personality. The masks fell, and Andrew could finally see who he had married. The forced coexistence between Tiffany and her mother became hell. Mrs. Louise, accustomed to being independent despite financial difficulties, didn't adapt well to the role of dependent. She criticized everything: the food Tiffany made, the way she cleaned the house, the clothes she chose. Tiffany, in turn, began to show impatience and cruelty that Andrew had never witnessed. I heard through neighbors, because in a small town everything is known. That she yelled at her mother, that she left the poor lady locked at home while she went out to work, that she emotionally blackmailed her whenever her mother complained about something. Andrew sought me out several times during this period. He was devastated, lost, not knowing how to deal with the situation he had helped create. "Mom, I don't recognize the woman I married anymore," he told me in one of those visits. "She's always irritated, always blaming others for problems, always demanding that I get money from somewhere to maintain the standard of living she created for her mother." "And what do you intend to do?" I asked.